My name's Guy Kestervan from pedalingpast.com. I've been a bike writer for 25 years. Before that, I was an archaeologist. And today, I'm here outside the beautiful keep of Norwich Castle to introduce
the Rebellion Way,
a brand new route put together on behalf of Cycling UK, the UK's leading cycling representation, advocacy and rights of way charity. And it's going to be an absolutely superb adventure. 225 miles or 370 kilometres of varied back road and gravel tracks all the way down to the south of Norfolk and just skirting along the edge of Suffolk, and then over through Thetford, back up through Swaffham to King's Lynn in the very northeast, and then around the coast before eventually coming in back via the Broads to Norwich itself. So an amazing area, Norfolk, for cycling. Obviously famed for being pretty flat and having these vast skyscapes, which just make it perfect for all levels of cyclist, all levels of fitness and experience. I mean, you can take this in 2 or 3 days. You could take it in 5 days. The beauty of Norfolk is its utterly relaxed character. I've ridden a lot of the routes already, putting together the experience hubs for Cycling UK, which I'll link to in the description below. And also, there will be a guide. I'll be writing the guidebook for the route, and there will be a full page with essential details, getting here, all the facilities at various points along the way on the website as well. But I do encourage you to buy the guidebook for the route, because obviously that helps fund creating the route in the first place, and it puts more coins in the coffer for Cycling UK, so they can do more good for the UK cyclists. But anyway, I'll be talking more about that as we go along our way. I'm about to head south, following the route of Boudicca's Rebellion, out of Norwich towards Diss. So, let's saddle up and set out. Well, Norwich is something of a labyrinth in terms of the one-way system. The good news is, it's actually very cycle-friendly. All sorts of cycle lanes. That's letting me get out of the city on a nice quiet route. But there's so many. Definitely take time to explore Norwich, either before you leave or when you get back here. It's such a storied city. As I say, one of the largest in East Anglia, even back in the Domesday period, when it was recorded as having over 25 different churches and a population of nearly 10,000. So that's before the Normans even got here. Very important Saxon trading place, very important during the Viking period, and initially set up, well, first named anyway, by the Romans. They actually set up a camp to the south, which is where we're heading now, at Acre. But although there's no traces of the the original settlement of the Iceni, Boudicca's tribe, in all likelihood, if they were going to put a fortification anywhere, it would have been under the present castle mound. But as you can see, heavily fortified. Beautiful stone keep on there now, so no traces of that surviving, but some really fascinating areas. It's got a really nice waterfront area, it's a student town, so it's nice and lively as well, and it's got supermarkets and all the kind of things you'd need to stock up, bike shops. Pretty much an ideal place to start a ride, and I have to say, rolling out of town's very agreeable too. And one great thing about starting from Norwich is you're out of the city really, really quickly. And here we are at Acre, the Roman town. So just south of Norwich, you can see a huge area. This massive bank still standing here, and the ditch in front of it probably would have been another bank or palisade there. And I don't know if you can see, just over the trees there, you've got the church right in the corner of the old town, which is probably on the site of an old Roman temple. And this town was built after the Boudiccan Rebellion was crushed, and kind of just to settle the whole area down and create a proper Roman civilized sense of society in the area. But going back to the Boudiccan Rebellion, and why is that so significant? Well, because it was it nearly knocked the Romans clean out of Britain. After the Claudian invasion in 43 AD, the Iceni had actually got on pretty well with the Romans. The king kind of subjugated a little bit. You know, they just work together. You get Iceni coins still being produced in that period. So, you know, the Romans liked to get along where they could, but there was generally a tradition that when the king died, if he was, you know, sort of subject to the Romans, he would hand over the territory to the Romans on his death. But in this case, he didn't. He handed it over to Boudicca, his daughter. By all accounts, an absolutely fearsome, tall, tawny-haired warrior goddess of a woman, famous, described as having a harsh voice and fiery eyes. Proper boss was Boudicca. But unfortunately, the Romans didn't take kindly to that on many levels, and the governor at the time, particularly odious man, had her beaten and her 2 daughters raped by legionaries. And yeah, she wasn't going to take that. So she got together with the Iceni and other tribes and raised hell. Raised a huge army which headed south. From here, they headed to Colchester, St Albans, and then London, razing all 3 cities to the ground and killing an estimated 80,000 people in the process. And it was a real shock to the Romans that not only had they been pushed back by the Britons, but it had been done by a woman. So unfortunately, the reprisals were pretty brutal, and the Iceni were very much put to the sword and then corralled back here at Caister. But obviously, Boudicca, the name lives on. She's still riding a chariot with her horses down in London, and for a lot of people, Queen Britannia from the Rule Britannia song and, you know, all those classic sort of icons, that is Boudicca. And so this is more or less where all that story unfolded. But we're heading south now towards Diss we're actually following that's the A470 right on the horizon there. That's the old Roman road, and we'll be kind of snaking along either side of that as we head south. And while the focus is largely on Boudicca and the Iceni, there's obviously a huge depth of history in this landscape. Not least Armingham, just a few kilometres away from Caister, which is the site of a huge double ring and wooden post henge monument, which has hunter-gatherer Mesolithic remains in the area and early farming Neolithic remains as well. So a similar date to Stonehenge, which obviously you'll know all about if you've done the King Alfred's Way. This area south of Norwich, it's just beautiful riding and architecture, as you can see. Loads of woods, deep hedgerows, gently rolling deserted lanes, bit of grass and gravel up the middle, just how I like it. And now we're on to our first gravel section of the route, just south of Thurston. And I've deliberately put the route together with Kieran at Cycling UK to make the most of modern gravel or all-road bikes with a bit more tyre clearance and a bit more tread, and their ability to explore light off-road sections like this. But like the rest of the ride, it's very much beginner friendly, relaxing and enjoyable for everyone. But just love taking these, you can see the old cobbles poking through from centuries of just hardening this route up for pack animals, hunting parties, drove roads. And it just makes sense to make the most of this landscape, especially when you're on a bike, when you're so connected to the history and the nature around you. And these hedgerows bursting with different flowers and plants at different times of the year, butterflies flitting about now, skylarks above. And if you don't fancy a bit of light off-road, or your bike isn't up to it, then pretty much every section can be very easily mirrored very close by with a nice quiet back road instead. Just obviously be aware that while I'm bone shaking over parched mud at the moment, but sections like this are obviously going to be a lot slower and stickier after the rain or in winter. And actually, seeing as I've stopped at the gate, I may as well introduce you to Whackton Common, which is an old medieval common grazing ground, and still grazed by the local villagers and farmers. So again, a proper throwback. This is such a medieval landscape here in Norfolk. It really is dramatically unchanged. And when the old gravel drove road and the common bring you to somewhere as beautiful as this, Whackton Hall with its little duck pond and its half-timbered barn conversion, which you're never going to find on the road. This is where I think having the route partially on gravel really makes sense. You are going to have to pay attention to your navigation though, because there's no signs out here. So keep a close eye on your GPS if you're using one, or have your map ready. Yes, there's a few twists and turns through these fields, but beautiful proper prairie landscape out here. And even now these big farms, ancient farm buildings and halls just speak to why this was such a rich area, stretching way back, right to when Mesolithic hunter-gatherers were here, and the Iceni, how the Neolithic settlers built their henge, why the Iceni were such a rich tribe with their own coinage even before the Romans came here, and evidence of trading all over Europe. Just such a rich, fertile landscape. And just look at that. These little gems like that ruined church on this byway into Gissing. Spectacular. It really is beautiful around here. And this area, as we're heading down towards this, is actually part of the Norfolk Quiet Lanes project, where they've deliberately earmarked some areas for walking and cycling and horsing, and deliberately tried to reduce traffic and calm it down so people can enjoy beautiful rural landscape. It really is perfect cycling country if you just want to relax and roll out the miles with minimal strain, but a load of interest just in the detail. All sorts of things hopping and flapping about in the hedgerows around me. I'm no expert, but definitely very wildlife rich. And this trackway is actually part of the Boudicca Way walking route. So at the moment, Queen of the Iceni and Boudicca are galloping hand in hand on the chariot, hell-bent on vengeance and heading for Colchester, ahead of a massive Celtic army, or just on a gravel bike saying hello to rabbits and wondering whether to have that calzone you stuffed in your back pocket. Either way, it's a fabulous way to spend summer's afternoon. I mean, we are literally a few hundred metres away from the main road here, but this could not feel any more forgotten or be any more deserted by traffic. Hardly seen a soul all afternoon. I guess New Road confirms that this was the old one. So there's a good chance that was actually a bit of Roman road we were riding along, to the alignment's certainly right. And now, just on a little detour as we head into this, to pick up the Angles Way, named after obviously the Anglians who came across with the Jutes and the Danes and the Saxons to set up Anglo-Saxon Britain. There's a little ford crossing. I think there is a bridge just upstream, but shallow enough to manage. And now I'm in Diss. Beautiful little market town right on the Norfolk Suffolk border, founded in Anglo-Saxon times, very important for trade in the medieval period, like a lot of the towns around here. A beautiful range of buildings and this lovely mere with the ducks in the middle. Hardly surprising then that it became internationally famous as the favourite place of baggy-trousered hip-hop icon MC Hammer in his famous song, You Can't Touch This. I think he's right. This is a lovely little place. Medieval buildings, cantilevered out, nice pedestrian walkway. The old church ahead, bunting still up from the Jubilee. Very, very English. So, heading up the hill, out of town, past the bank. Next stop, Thetford. Oh, what a charming place. Heading west now to some lovely, utterly deserted heathland. Classic kind of fens landscape, well, south of England landscape really. All very low lying still around here. It's kind of got flatter again. Norwich was relatively rolling. Definitely flatter down here near Diss. But that just means a nice healthy ticking along on the pedals. And this section between Diss and Thetford, which is also National Cycle Network 30, really is tranquility personified. Incredible, these huge skyscapes. Fields full of cereal. Crops just rustling in the wind. You can see why the Vikings thought they'd found the promised land when they came across here, scratching a living alongside the fjords. Just scudding through these gorgeous villages, honeysuckle thatched cottages, half timbered manor houses, more thatch. Just so English, so beautiful. Don't even know where this is, what this is called. It's just yet another beautiful place down in South Norfolk. Actually, I think we might actually be in Suffolk at the moment. Not sure which side of the river we are. We're definitely right on the border. And we've just come up the Roman road near Thetford now. And this area is just full of earthworks and tumuli. This is called the Gallops where we are now, but further back over there, there's a really long linear earthwork called the Devil's Ditch, which is probably Iron Age, maybe even earlier in origin, but often they got picked up again in the post-Roman period as well, as a way to, because, tribal boundaries came back once the Romans had gone. A lot of these societies reverted quite significantly, and so there's old landscape boundaries, and I guess those old pagan beliefs came back into the forefront again. But again, fascinating landscape, undeserted still. Amazing. Just birdsong and insects. Oh, it's a beautiful route for recharging your batteries. It really is. And not only is this heath and forestry perfect gravel riding terrain, but it's also a nice workaround for getting into Thetford, because it's quite hard to dodge the main roads if you stick into tarmac, but when you've got the freedom to use these forest tracks, then it's a whole lot easier. Just stopped at a gate here and spotted another reason why this area was so popular with prehistoric people. Flint, what they made all their tools out of before they discovered copper, bronze and then iron. So this area absolutely loaded with it, and we'll be going to famous flint mine at Grimes Graves later on. I'm meandering, and finally rolling into Thetford. Oh, just need to find a fish and chip shop. That's what I'm at. So 50 miles in, more or less, and I'm in Thetford. Beautiful little market town in South Norfolk. I mean, evidence going right back to the Neolithic and the Mesolithic locally, but really comes to prominence in the Iron Age as a really important centre for the Iceni on Icknield Way, which is an old prehistoric trail, and then gets taken over by the Romans later on. A lot of Saxon activity around here as well, and then the Vikings. Ivar the Boneless brings his great army here, camps before heading inland to fight the Saxon kings. And then it becomes then a Norman castle is superimposed on top of the Iron Age hill fort that was here, and then it grows in importance as a trading centre right through the medieval period. And now it's just a very pretty, very sociable feeling for a Friday night market town. So I've had my fish and chips, and now it's crack on through the famous Thetford Forest. And as well as the old church and the Norman castle, it's really nice medieval buildings. There's also a bunch of modern amenities. So you've got plenty of places to eat, plenty of places to stay, supermarkets, bike shops, pharmacies. So nice little resupply and nice little resupply spot on the early part of the route. And it's also got a railway station. So as I mentioned at the start, be quite good alternative place to start if you're coming up from the south. And again, look how lovely these villages, and that signature Norfolk round church tower here in Croxton, and these brick and cobble, flint cobble building. It's a really traditional housing style around here. You basically get all the frames done in brickwork, and then the infill is these flint cobbles. I do love it here, really do love it. And currently on National Cycle Network 13 and 30 as we head north out of Thetford. I can categorically state the roads around Thetford on a Friday night are not busy. All forest to myself as far as I can tell. Well, I was expecting some red warning flags around here for the firing ranges. I wasn't expecting to see a warning sign for dog sled training. But yeah, be careful after 4:30 p.m. on this particular track, because you can't get charged by a pack of huskies. Who knew Thetford Forest was this diverse? Grassy single track in the warm evening sun with deer hopping about in front of me from time to time. I have to say, this is pretty special. Unfortunately, Grimes Graves is shut, but you can see on the photo there, these amazing, you know, proper preserved mine workings. And although that kind of looks medieval or even Industrial Revolution with the brickwork on it and everything, the way it's structured, these mines date from the Neolithic and to the Iron Age. So that's kind of, well, sort of 0 BC right back to 4000 BC. So 6,000 years ago, they were digging out flint for stone axes. And, you know, Neolithic is a Stone Age period. So they're just using antler picks, using shoulder blades as shovels. And they reckon, this is an incredible thing, they found 433 different pits, and they go down and then they spread out in galleries underneath. So it's a really well-organised mining operation. And then they're backfilled afterwards, so there's no collapsing of the ground. So they found 433 pits, and they reckon that they took 16 to 18,000 tonnes of flint out of these mines over that sort of 4,000 year period, which is absolutely remarkable. And certainly in the Bronze Age, it seems like it was a proper industrial process, because there's a lot of middens, there's signs of settlement, and you can see they were grazing sheep and cattle, and they were milking the sheep and cattle from what you can tell from all the bones. They're properly domesticating their animals by this point as well. So unfortunately, we're just going to have to look at that. But obviously, if you're coming past during the day, then well worth a visit. You know, super significant prehistoric site. And Thetford was the first town to have a black mayor when Dr. Minns took the post in 1904. It has the Charles Burnell Steam Museum, open on Saturdays, and it was where most of Dad's army was filmed. Even though it's supposed to be a town on the south coast, they actually filmed most of it around Thetford. And that Steam Museum also had a display of all the favourite vehicles from Dad's army. So if you like your charming, quirky World War II Home Guard comedy adventures, then you're gonna love Thetford. Don't panic, Mr. Bannering, don't panic, they don't like it Upham, etc, etc. And it's certainly not just sterile pine forest either around here. Beautiful broadleaf as well. I mean, I'm blowing my own trumpet here, but I've not ridden this section, you see, so this is all a surprise to me, just how good this is. And if you want an introduction to why you should try gravel, then I think it's going to be pretty hard to beat. And those little low mounds over there under the trees, almost certain they're pretty... Oh, look at the deer! I'd say they're almost certainly prehistoric burial mounds. Like I say, this area is absolutely loaded with prehistory. I love places like this. Just so timeless. I mean, yeah, the pines are new, but when you've got areas like this with just millennia of stories and mystery, and just think of their lives and all the lives between them and ours, the people who've come down these paths, you know, still tending cattle. Nice big island cow there, you know, basically doing the same as what people are doing here now. But what language were they speaking? Where were they from? Oh look, little Fenland Pond. Oh, Linford Arboretum. That's why you're getting such a range of beautiful trees. And there's actually a little coffee hut and some loos here as well, so that's good to know. Linford, hang on, how far are we outside of, sorry, I'm just looking at me GPS, 66 miles, so that's about 13 miles out of Thetford. So yeah, if you need to get your fish and chips gone, oh, you don't need that sort of detail. How sordid, Kesterburn. It's a lovely facility if you need them. I'll warn you now, this bit of common at the other side of the Arboretum is a proper little maze, but it's beautiful flowing single track. So pay attention to your GPS and have the scale on high, because it's quite easy to get on the wrong path. As long as you're generally heading in the right direction. I think I still am. It's all golden, literally, with the sun behind me at the moment. And we're actually running alongside a big set of firing ranges at the moment, and it got me thinking that every route I've done these videos and guidebooks for, King Alfred's Way, with Imber and Salisbury Plain, and all the bits around Strensham Common, Cornwall with the airfields as well, they've all got military firing ranges on them, because actually it's a really good way for land to be kept open and not developed. It just gives you these little wild corridors to sneak through. And the other great thing, pretty much all of this route, certainly the recent part of it, has been really good. All weather, hard pack. And even when it's not been gravel, it's been really fast draining sandy soil. So this is going to run really well all year round, I reckon. And the military history of this area goes right back to World War II. As you can see from this 7th Armoured Division Desert Rats Memorial here, with this Cromwell tank. Little Audrey 1 sat on top of it to commemorate all the soldiers who fought their way from El Alamein in the desert, where they turned the war against Rommel in Africa, and then they were stationed here. They fought in Italy, and then they were stationed here in Thetford to retrain and regroup before crossing over with the Normandy landing, before they pushed all the way through into Germany. It's golden hour, get any more golden! And this is Oxburgh Hall, which is beautiful Elizabethan wall and fortified manor house. Absolutely incredible National Trust site. Actually visited this on my Swaffham to Sandringham loop, so I'll probably just stick a couple of stills in from closer up there. But I know there's a fabulous church just around the corner as well. There it is. And it's particularly interesting because that end is still in working order, but the back end of it is completely open and ruined. And there's one of the gatehouses to Oxford. And this is the superbly named village of Cockley Clay. And that's its very, very old church. Actually dates back to 7th century parts, or at least the history of it does. And Cockley Clay used to have an Iron Age museum as well. Little theme park, but unfortunately, but some archaeologists complained that the roundhouse wasn't correct. It had a dirty great post in the centre, where of course that's where the fire would have been, and it also had a hole in the top or something. Anyway, so they took the roundhouse down, and all the people who didn't really care about the exact archaeology complained there was no roundhouse, so it shut for good. Bit of shame, really. And this is Swaffham. In Old English, the home of the Swabians. So people from southwest Germany came across and settled here. It's a natural high point in the landscape, in this Breckland landscape. So you know, it's an obvious place to have a settlement, and it's on the pilgrimage route to Sandringham as well. And it really kind of grew in the 14th and 15th century on the wool trade, and on, you know, and it being a transport hub. So it's a beautiful Georgian town now. Some lovely Georgian buildings and this nice market cupola in the middle of town. And also in the Georgian period, it became a real sort of, well, party place really by those times. So it had a theatre, it had a race course, it had assembly rooms and ballrooms. And Nelson's wife actually didn't often stayed down here. Nelson's wife actually chose to live here because it was a lot livelier than up in the Burnhams, where the old admiral preferred. So I'm going to call it a day for today in Swaffham. It's actually gone far better than I expected. I mean, the going is so good, even though it's probably been about 50-50 gravel. Well, that's what it feels like anyway in terms of time. But the gravel here runs so well, and there's so little elevation and climbing, you just scoot along, even though I've had a headwind all the way down to Diss and Thetford. So I'm probably going to get myself a pint of Guinness and then going to check in at one of nature's Airbnbs. There's a nice little woodland, I think, just north of here, which is where I'll be spending the night. So good night and see you in the morning. And one massive advantage of Norfolk for riding is that the weather is nearly always better here than it is in the rest of the country, because it's right over on the east. Most of the Atlantic rain gets scraped off well before it gets here, so while my mates are at home, soaking wet weather up in Yorkshire. Another beautiful morning down here north of Swaffham, and currently riding on the ancient Roman road, heading west-east. the old Roman road to Yarmouth. So again, here we are at dawn on a pathway that's almost certainly been used. I mean, up high on this ridge line, perfect place to put a trackway as soon as you started using an area. So probably a trackway used since the dawn of mankind's settling in this area. Oh, big day ahead, but I cannot wait. Oh, look at the lights. We've got hares, we've got oyster catchers. Whew. Thank you, Norfolk. Thank you. And as I roll over the brow of the hill, got one of the most beautiful views of the whole route, dropping down the fantastic medieval landscape of Castle Acre. And now we've got beautiful view of Castle Acre Priory there. It's a Cluniac house, quite a rare monastic order, famous for really beautiful decorated buildings, and that was set up in 1090 by the Warrens family, who created this whole amazing medieval village landscape at Castle Acre, and flourished down on the banks of the stream. We'll be crossing that on a ford in a minute, well, as a footbridge luckily, in a minute, and was then unfortunately pulled apart during Henry VIII's reformation of the churches, which killed off pretty much every monastery in the UK. But you get to see it here. I mean, you can loop round and actually visit it, get inside it, have a look around. It's being renovated at the moment, but still amazing. I mean, loads and loads of the buildings. I mean, none of the roofs, but a lot of the buildings and the Priory Farm all still surviving there. Definitely well worth a detour and a visit. I don't think we'll take the ford. 5 o'clock in the morning might be a bit too bracing. But there's another stunning view of the Priory over there. And you come into Castle Acre up this little rise. You've still got a medieval gate in front of you. And I don't think the portcullis is original, but that's such a beautiful place. This is. And this is Castle Acre Castle itself. I mean, Castle Acre was already a significant settlement in the Saxon period, ruled over by a lord called Toki, who actually crops up in the history of this area right up to the north to Hunstanton, where we'll be heading later today. But you can see huge earthworks all the way around. You've got this outer bailey, and then this massive motte in the centre with this huge stone keep, and obviously it was a centre for sort of entertaining. I mean, it didn't really ever have a military history, but a real administrative centre and a centre for the courts, and you know, and just entertaining, and by the Warrens family. But although most of it was built up in the 11th to 12th century, the site was actually completely derelict by 1400. So huge site. I mean, like the Priory, which is one of the best preserved monastic settlements in the UK. You know, look at the size of the moat. This is, for a baronial castle, this is showy. But unfortunately, just didn't last long for him. And as I head north out of Castle Acre, actually on Pedder's Way for the first time. I actually passed signs for it right down near Thetford, but this was literally set in stone by the Romans There's a north-south road to the coast, but the number of round barrows and prehistoric remains all the way along it from all periods show that it's been a trackway right back millennia before the Romans were knocking about. And you can actually follow this all the way up to the coast, on-road and off-road sections. So this is just one of the more tarmacked ones, not quite as evocative, this section, but still thousands and thousands of years of footsteps, hoof prints stretching out before and behind us. Love this history on a bike thing. And if you're expecting Norfolk to be totally pan flat, as you can see, lovely low rolling downs landscape this morning. And a classic gravel down the middle, barely used country road. And while the landscape around here is all beautiful farms, back lanes, and oh, it has a hare, and double track for ancient broadleaf woodlands. Oh, and of course, Anglo-Saxon churches with beautiful round towers. Be prepared for things to get a bit Top Gun occasionally, because we're just a few miles north of the big RAF base where 617 Squadron, the Dam Busters, are based. So you regularly get low flyovers from Typhoon jets. Now this is a fascinating piece of landscape. Basically, old sand and gravel quarries, so watch out for the sand traps with your front wheel, but now flooded and turned into an incredible country park with these huge lakes. It's like something out of Germany or France when I stayed there cycle touring. Absolutely amazing place. And of course, incredible for wildlife too. And shout out to the awesome, if slightly snaky, cycle path network in Kings Lynn. The only issue is it's so comprehensive, it's pretty easy to get lost, so make sure you just follow the town centre signs rather than trying to keep your nose in the GPX, because that's just got me properly lost. Park full of pagodas, painted elephants, and old medieval history. Kings Lynn is way more fascinating and a lot prettier than you might expect. And this is why. The river that runs right the way up to the sea, and this link to Kings Lynn and the historic warehouses you can see behind me, with major trading ports and cities all over the Baltic and Northern Europe. Bremen, Hamburg, Lübeck, Kings Lynn. That's what it would say on your medieval shopping bag. Had a monastery here from 1101, later turned into a very, very lovely minster. And it's just, you know, you look down these little streets, beautiful cobbled medieval streets. It's got a fantastic guild hall as well. And it's got a theatre where Shakespeare almost certainly played, but it's a historic dock area. It's all been restored and done up. Beautiful place to ride around, and like I say, really cycle friendly too. And as a major town, it's a great place to stock up on supplies, or one of the key point, you know, obviously point for a stopover as well. And as a major town, it's obviously a great place for a stopover or a resupply on this route. Well, like I say, it's even a starting point coming in from the north or east, coming in from the north or west. And again, you've got a superb cycle path network out of King's Lynn and through the woodlands as well. But there are so many options, and often if you're looking at your GPS, you'll go, oh well, it must be straight down that road. Whereas if you look carefully and have the scale turned up high enough, you'll see there's a cycle path like this just next to the road, down a little turn off. But as long as you keep heading for the signs to Sandringham and Castle Rising, you should be fine. And now rolling through Castle Rising, which is another planned medieval village. Huge church there, and Flemish style houses, and unsurprisingly, given the name, a whacking great castle, which is where we're going next. But beautiful village this. It's a conservation village as well, so it knows it's posh. And this is Castle Rising Castle itself. As you can see, massive Motte and Bailey Castle again. I mean, to be fair, it's mostly a motte. Well, no, there is an inner Bailey as well, and an amazing stone keep. Unfortunately, I'm a bit early to get into it today, but luckily I popped in when I was last here on the Swaffham to Sandringham route. So you'll probably be looking at a nice still picture of my bike parked up, looking at this beautiful stone keep in the centre of the Bailey. But anyway, we're going to roll out through Castle Rising Village, through the Deer Park, and over to Sandringham to continue the unrelenting poshness of this part of Norfolk. And again, Sandringham is surrounded by this beautiful wooded parkland, and because it's Norfolk, it's basically deserted. And this is the very lovely Sandringham Terrace Cafe and Restaurant, which I have been lucky enough to frequent several times recently, but unfortunately evidently not a set of teas made for 7:30. So looks like I'll be looking for a brew in Hunstanton. And if you want to actually see the house, I mean, Queen Victoria brought it into the royal family in the 1870s, and it's been the royal retreat up here in Norfolk ever since then. So 150 years now. And the house is down there, like I say, a short walk. And Sandringham is essentially halfway around the route in terms of miles. So this seems like a good point to say thanks for coming along for the first part of the Queen Iceni Way with me. Massive thanks to Cycling UK for commissioning me to create, curate, narrate, animate and write the guidebook for the route. So make sure you order yourself a copy of that as soon as it's available. Check the Cycling UK website for all the details you need on the route and the GPX file of the route. If you're not already a member, please join up while you're there, because that gives them the funds to carry on doing routes like this. You know, this follows on the heels of King Alfred's Way, Great North Trail, West Kernow Way in Cornwall, the trail that they've just launched down in Kent, which my mind is blank on. Sorry, it's been a day. And also gets you excellent rates on insurance, gets you legal cover, deals from major manufacturers and shops, and a cracking little monthly magazine, which I also occasionally pop up in. And massive thanks to my Patreon subscribers who pledge a small monthly amount to the Guy Kes TV channel, which really helps me put aside the time to make videos like this and my normal bike testing and adventure videos. So if you like what I'm doing, then please consider subscribing on Patreon. But click the notifications, subscribe, give this a thumbs up like so YouTube knows it should share it to more people, and most importantly, join me for part 2 as we head up to Hunstanton, loop around the north coast, and then back down towards Norwich.